Hi, and welcome to Ruby's Ask Me Anything office hours. During these events, we take questions from students all over the world about any culinary questions you might be having while you're taking our Ruby courses. You can actually type in your question on the top right hand side where it says Add Question Here, type the question, and hit the Add button underneath. Your question will go to our moderators to make sure that it's appropriate for the host of the day. My expertise is in plant based culinary. So most of the questions that come to me are typically something to do with plant based culinary, or at least in that realm. After it goes through our moderation, it'll be posted up on the right hand side. Sometimes we'll have a question that might be better for another host, and sometimes we'll bounce those to a different host to be able to make sure that you're getting the correct answer for the questions there. If I don't know something, of course, I'm going to tell you. So if I do get a question that I don't know the answer to, I'll refer to someone else or get back to you later on a question for those two. If you like the questions on the right hand side, you can put a heart on them. It'll actually bring the questions further up to the top as well. So we're going to jump right in today. It looks like we have a couple questions from Robert here to start us off. Robert, I can see that you've taught classes at Le Cordon Bleu. I plan to study there in the future. What are your thoughts on how this course will help me prepare for a diploma with that school? So yeah, I used to be a guest speaker for a host of different culinary schools. Most of them were in Austin, Texas, but Le Cordon Bleu is one of them. And I used to go in to specifically talk about whole food plant-based cooking and also how to cook without oil. It's definitely something that's not covered in traditional culinary schools. So that was an area that I used to go in for like a day to talk about a topic. Sometimes it'd be a couple days or a week, depending on the school, and specifically cater to that specific use case scenario. So if you're looking to study there in the future, how will the course help you prepare for a diploma at that school? It really depends on the course that you're taking, Robert. I'm not exactly sure which one you are, but the great thing about taking the Ruby courses is it's going to really give you the fundamentals and foundational principles that you'll need for any culinary school or working in any kitchen. We do have a lot of people that look both at a culinary school and the Ruby platform and decide to go with the Ruby platform because you can get it for a much more affordable price, and then use those skills to be able to work in a kitchen to further develop your expertise in certain areas. So, by taking this course, whatever course you're taking through Ruby, it's definitely going to help you get a heads up on what you would be learning at Le Cordon Bleu as well. And Le Cordon Bleu will basically kind of take you down a certain road to be able to have a live function with what you've been doing on Ruby as well. Hope that helps, Robert. Julia, can you share any tips for freshness in preparing a plant based food? I'm transitioning to a plant based diet. So, maintaining freshness and prepping plant based food. So, maintaining freshness, I think, is really, the best way to be able to do that is to buy as in season and local as possible. So, if you're eating locally, basically, if you think about this, like if you pick any fruit or vegetable from its vine, it's starting to decompose from that moment on. So it's losing its flavor, but it's also losing its nutrient value, starting at the moment you pick it. So the closer you can get your food to the source, the more flavor and the more nutrients it will have in it. It's one of the reasons that if you grow your own tomatoes in the backyard in the peak of the season, they're going to be so good. The other part of that is seasonality, right? So if you're eating foods that are in season, they're more likely to come from a closer source to you, and they're going to have a better flavor. So if you're buying tomatoes in the middle of January and they're being exported from somewhere like Mexico, it takes them a very long time to get to wherever you are. I'm speaking in the United States. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. So if I'm buying a tomato in the middle of January and it's coming from Mexico, it's probably going to take about 7 to 10 days after it's been picked to be able to get to me. It has to be picked, put into a bushel, then put onto a truck and then to a train, and then that train comes across the states and has to be delivered by another truck to the grocery store that I'm buying it from. So it takes a long time for it to get there. That entire time, it's losing its flavor and losing its nutrients. So by the time it gets here, it doesn't taste so much like a tomato. It's just kind of like a watery kind of, blob kind of a thing that tastes a little bit like a tomato. But if I were to buy that from a local farmer or grow them myself, um, as soon as I pick that tomato, I can slice it open. It's going to have a really full flavor to it and a lot of nutrients in it as well too. And that goes with any fruit or vegetable. So that's basically what I would say for freshness: is try to buy as close to home as possible, as local as possible, and then also try to buy in season when possible. If you're not able to do it in season, frozen vegetables are a great way to be able to get a big flavor as well too. Because what happens with frozen vegetables, typically they have flash freezing facilities very close to where they're growing the produce, and then they'll freeze them very quickly to be able to get the flavor stuck in them right away. Canned vegetables are kind of the same way too. Like if, you open a can of tomatoes, it always tastes very tomatoey. It tastes just like a tomato should. That's because they're picked at the peakness of ripeness and then canned to be able to keep that flavor in at the same time. So, if you're living in the northern regions where you're not being able to grow things as much, that's a great way to be able to keep freshness on the same way, oddly enough, through frozen and canned. But during months where you can grow that, getting it as close to possible or close to as possible is best. um, Now, prepping plant-based food, that kind of depends on you and what you like to do. I have a live event that I did, that you can search on here too. It was I think it was called Meal Based Prep. And Patrick, I might task you to be able to put a link for that somewhere if you can find it in here. But basically, what I showed for that is being able to take all your, go to the grocery store, get everything that you need. But when you get home, put everything away that needs to go in the freezer and the pantry, but then get your produce out and get a cutting board out and cut it up into usable size pieces, and then put it into airtight containers. That way you can basically, stock all the things that you need to be able to have prepped in your refrigerator. You're essentially creating a line on in your refrigerator. And what I mean by a line is that a restaurant, when you go to a restaurant, they don't have, you don't order like a meal like or like pad thai and you start chopping up the vegetable in the back there, right? They have everything chopped and marinating and everything ready for people to come in and order. Now, if you do that same thing in your own kitchen, you can really make cooking really fast and easy. So, if you have your tofu already marinating or you have your vegetables all cut up for the week, you can basically take out the ingredients that you need for the meal and make your meal in less than 10 minutes. That's how you're able to get meals so quickly at a restaurant because they've done all the prep ahead of time. So that is probably one of the best ways that I would say to be able to prep for plant-based food diets is to be able to prep ahead of time. Is when you get from the grocery store, do most of the prep then. It puts about an hour into it, after you're doing your grocery shopping, but it's well worth it in the week because that hour spent then is not being spent in the week to prep the food at the moment when you're actually eating. So, hope that helps, Julia. Robert, can you describe which dishes or foods are best to use with black truffle oil versus white truffle oil? Is there a particular time in the process or technique? Um, you know, so let's talk about timing. Timing, typically you want to finish with the truffle oil because if you cook with a truffle oil, you'll a lot of times the flavor will go completely out. So when you get something like a truffle based fry or something like that, like they're adding the truffle oil at the end of the dish to be able to get that big truffle flavor out of it. Thanks, Patrick, for putting the link down there under this question. You can see the plant-based meal planning live event. Going back to truffle oil, so black truffle oil versus white truffle oil. So black truffle oil is typically used on more kind of umami and like kind of heavier foods, where white truffle oil is used on lighter foods. So the fry example earlier I talked about would be more of a white truffle oil, where black truffle oil might be paired with something like mushrooms, or a lot of meat dishes are paired with like a black truffle oil. The white truffle oil you're going to be using in like dressings and different things like that as well too. So much more, dark versus light. The darker items, the more heavier items, the more umami items are going to be using the black truffle oil, where the white truffle oil are more light items, more green items as well, to be able to kind of have that lightness in there as well. So I hope that helps, Robert. Another one from Robert. Is there a particular vintage of red wine that you suggest for using in French dishes? I just lost your question here. Such as coq de vin or beef Burgundy. So, like beef Burgundy traditionally is going to be a Pinot, right? I don't do beef Burgundy, but I do mushroom or seitan Burgundies. And yeah, Pinot Noir is typically what you're using in those, and you're usually buying them from Burgundy if you can. Now, that being said, you don't have to stick to that exact rule. That's okay to be able to break the rules a little bit. It's one of my favorite things to do in the kitchen. That's why I kind of started doing what I do with vegan and plant-based food, is looking for conversions of traditional meals like a burgundy or beef bourguignon, to be able to turn them into like a mushroom or seitan version of those. So there's not a specific vintage, but variety and varietals. I'd probably go for, a dark Pinot. You could definitely use a Cabernet or like a Merlot or something like that as well too. But beef Burgundy is typically, going to be used from Burgundy, from the region of Burgundy. So hope that helps. Mary, do you have any good recipe ideas for not mushy foods? It seems like all you see is salads, soups, and mushy slop foods. I'm looking for not mushy taco filling, not mushy casseroles. It is impossible. Oh, and this is separate. Is impossible meat okay to eat or processed? Thanks in advance. So let's address the impossible, because that's an easy one right off the bat. So impossible meat, I always look at it as Impossible Meats as a great converter, right? So if you're converting from being 100%, like you're eating mostly meat, going over to plant-based, Impossible Meats are a great way to be able to convert from one to the other. They have the look, the feel, the taste, of a regular burger. So you're getting the same kind of thing, but you're lowering your cholesterol levels on those. Now, that being said, if you uh, Impossible Burgers definitely have a lot of stuff in them, even more stuff than burgers would, So I would definitely wouldn't stay on that for too long. It's not like they're not meant to be like a thing where you eat all the time on the Impossible stuff. So I might veer away from that a little bit, on the Impossible Burger side. So, it's a great when you're just kind of converting over, but definitely look at a plan to be able to kind of escape over into more of a plant-based and whole food diet. Now, the second part of that question is, do you have any good recipes not for mushy plant foods? So, yeah, plant-based foods don't always have to be mushy or soups or salads. In fact, my wife and I, we always kind of, like, when we're going to a restaurant, the only thing that's available for us is a salad. We usually pick a different place. Not that we don't love salads, we love salads, but we just want something that's a little more inventive than that. Now, non-mushiness is, I think that's kind of funny, because there's a huge variety of foods out there that are non-mushy in the plant-based world. The same kind of crusts that you can get on all kinds of things, you can do in plant-based foods. So just even from like fries and, doing like beets and having, different vegetables, you can, do a cooking technique on them to be able to make them nice and crispy. In fact, eggplant and zucchini are one of those things that we love to do. Like we'll roast them first in the oven, and then we'll do a broil on them to be able to kind of crisp them up. I do the same thing with Brussels sprouts too, where I'll do a nice roast on the Brussels sprout, and then I will broil them at the end and get them nice and crispy, where there's kind of some burnt ends on them and they're really, really crispy. And then I'll toss them in a kimchi as well to make kimchi Brussels sprouts. So, depending on the cooking techniques that you're using, you can get that kind of crispiness that you're looking for. Now, if you're looking for different things like in tofu as well, I do a couple different dishes where I'll do like a crusted tofu. A lot of times I'll bake them off to be able to have a crust on the outside. I'll do certain dishes where I'll toss them in like a flour or cornstarch to be able to get a nice crispiness on the outside too when you're cooking them. So sometimes I'll bake them and then do the cornstarch and then, put them into a dish, typically with like an Asian sauce or something like that when I'm doing that. But those stand out really nice and have a nice crunch to them where they're crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. Um, so yeah, there are a lot of different things that are non-mushy in the plant-based world. I think just exploring a couple of cooking techniques is probably where you want to go to be able to make that happen. And even in your, taco fillings, you can do things like that, like doing, tempeh bacon or different, things. My wife and I were talking about doing. We used to make this rice paper bacon, which is basically mixing like a tamari mixture and some liquid smoke or smoked salt, a little paprika together, soaking those and then baking them off, and it becomes this nice crispy bacon-like texture that you can put into sandwiches for like a BLT, but not using bacon, using the rice paper instead. You can also do the same thing with seaweed. I've seen a lot of those too. Our favorites are probably the mushroom bacon, which can be crispy as well. Do a shiitake bacon like that, mix it up, and it gets kind of crispy at the same time. So I hope that helps, Mary. Good luck on your journey. Kathleen, I'm trying to add more soy to my diet. I successfully cooked tofu, but would like your suggestions on how to cook tempeh. It seems a bit dry. So yeah, tempeh can be dry on this. I think that the mistake that a lot of people do is they just go right in with tempeh. So they'll open the package and then just kind of season it and put it into a pan. I think that the best way to start with tempeh for my own liking is I'll actually take the tempeh and boil it for just a couple minutes, and it basically kind of gets rid of that kind of funky fermentation kind of flavor to it, unless you like that, which is fine. But I'll usually boil it for like 3 to 4 minutes, and then I'll take it out, and then I'll slice it nice and thin, and then marinate it, and usually bake it off, and then put it into other things. Now I'll also just boil it, slice it, and then put it into like a stir fry or something like that, which is fine, as long as you have the seasoning to be able to come along with that. So I think what I always do is I'll start with a boil to be able to get that down, and look. It's not going to be dry anymore when you boil it that same way. Then I slice it pretty thin, and I'll do a marinade on it. And if I want a crispiness, I'll usually bake it up. If I don't want it to be as crispy, I might even do it a little thicker and then do it into a stir fry. Now you can also crumble tempeh as well too. So I've done a lot of different, pasta sauces with like a crumbled tempeh, or you can even do like a taco filling with tempeh as well too. Just kind of depends on your liking for those. But start out with boiling, then slice it or crumble as you want, season it, and then cook it after that. I hope that helps, Kathleen. Connie, please explain how you would use black salt in recipes and the type of black salt you would use. So black salt typically, I mean, if we're thinking about the same black salt, it's black salt is typically mined from an area that has a high sulfur content. So it has the flavoring of sulfur to it. I can't name the exact brand that I use. I have one that's just like like a grinder one as well. So it's kind of thicker and you grind it down to the texture you want it to. I most often use it in tofu scramble to be able to make it mimic the flavor of eggs. I don't use a lot of it. So I have like a container this big that's probably lasted me a couple of years. And it's pretty affordable to be able to do as well. Honestly, I wish I had a smaller container of it because it's like I don't really need that much of it. But that's typically where I would use the black salt if you're looking for anything that kind of has that eggy kind of flavor. So, I've done, I can't remember the name of the dish where you bake eggs in like a tomato sauce. It's a very Greek dish, but I've done that with a tofu before and used the black salt in that as well too. But I did the tofu instead of an egg, and then put the black salt over the top of it, and it helps to mirror that flavor, a little bit of nutritional yeast as well too. Yes, tarchuka. Thank you, Patrick. Good. Yep, but that's a great dish to be able to do those with. So other uses, like, I mean, that's typically the black salt that I think you're thinking of. There are other kinds of black salt too. Like I have a black salt from Hawaii that's actually from volcanoes and stuff like that. But that's just typically a little bit of show, and that's more for a finishing salt where you just put something on the end to add a little pop of color to it as well. But the black salt that I'm thinking of is more of the sulfuric style. Robert, as a professional private chef, how do you push back on restaurant owners or clients when they start dictating dishes too strongly? Well, that's an interesting question, Robert. That really comes down to what you are and what position you're in. Now, as a professional, and a private chef, you're providing a service for people, right? So if you have a client that's hiring you to be a private chef and they don't want to do a certain dish, then you typically wouldn't do that certain dish because they're paying you to do what they like. Now, if you have your own restaurant and stuff, then you can do kind of whatever you want on those, and you can do, beyond as whenever you want. But if a restaurant owner is also saying, "Look, I don't want to, have asparagus in the menu," well, if they own the restaurant, you kind of have to listen to what they do. Can you break the rules every so often? Maybe, but it depends on the owner, right? But just remember, as a chef, it is a position of service. So you're there to be able to let people enjoy the food that you're making. And if they request not to do a certain food, it's best probably not to do that certain food. And that can come down to allergens, it can come down to just a distaste of something. But all kinds of things that you might not think of. It's like you might think, okay, I know this tastes good, but for some reason they don't, and that's okay. So that's what I would say. The way to approach that is if you're working for a restaurant owner or a client, is to put their needs first and really approach that in the best way possible to be able to be of service. Diane, I would like a whole food plant based substitute for black licorice. A long time ago, I tried a recipe that used prunes that may have been coated with fennel. I don't remember. Do you know of any such recipes? So black licorice typically is used from the black licorice, or it's used from a licorice root, right? So the licorice root is very, very bitter. So you usually need to pair it with some sort of sweet and then a binder to combine the two. So like a black licorice root, or black licorice rope is typically the root, like some sort of binder, like a gelatin or maybe a flour or something like that. And then a sugar, like a lot of sugar to be able to offset the bitterness of the licorice. Now, if you're looking in something in that flavor profile, there might be something like you said. I think having prunes that have been coated with fennel is great. Like fennel, anise, those are great kind of substitutions for licorice. You can still go with the licorice root though. But for a whole food plant based, you want to switch up what you're using for your sweet. Usually it's a granulated sugar, something that will melt away and that you won't be able to see at all. That's going to be a little harder with whole food plant based. You might want to think of either dates or prunes would be a good one as well too. You could do apricots, a lot of different things like those as well. And then you're going to have to experiment with a little bit to see how much licorice root to that dried fruit you're going to use. And then I would recommend blending them all together. You'll end up with a kind of a paste to be able to do that. Now, the nice thing is you're not going to need as much of a binder if you're using the dried fruit like that, because the dried fruit will help stick the licorice root together. Then you can form it into the shape you want to. Now, typically it won't, like if, like a licorice root or a licorice, like stick kind of thing where it's kind of bendy and you can flop it around like that. You wouldn't be able to do with that with the dried fruit and the licorice unless you did something like an agar, which would help kind of bind that all together. It's a replacement for gelatin that's a vegan, can be a whole food plant based as well too. So, um, you know, it's a little bit of experimentation there, but if you're looking specifically for a substitute for black licorice, I would stick with the licorice, and then, the prunes would be nice because 'cause it'd keep the color if you're looking specifically for black licorice, and then blend those up to be able to get the flavor profile you're looking for. Now you can do it as little as just those 2 ingredients, but again, it's not gonna have the same texture. A little bit of salt in there might be able to increase the flavor of those 2. You don't have to add the salt to it, but then think about a binder at the same process, and sticking with a whole food plant-based binder if you can. I hope that helps. Anna Marie, I literally just came in from picking up my CSA. Besides a lot of lettuce, I have a bunch of garlic tops. What do you do with the garlic tops? I love cooking with garlic tops. They're fantastic. So, kind of think about them like green onions, right? So there's a dish that I do with tofu that is, it's basically I'll make like an orange sauce and I'll squeeze a bunch of oranges and put a little tamari in and maybe, some sesame seed or a little miso and kind of mix those things all together. And then I will, before I add my sauce, I'll take my baked tofu that I'll take, tofu, cube it and bake it off. And then I'll cook that baked tofu in a wok really hot with kind of thicker slices of green onion, or I might do garlic tops in the same way because you're going to get a nice garlicky flavor out of that. Put a little ginger into that with the tofu, and then add this orange sauce. That's what I do, But you can add any kind of sauces you want to them. So that would probably be one of my first go tos. Is a great way to be able to do that. But you can use garlic tops in a whole host of different ways. You can slice them thinner and put them into pastas, into all kinds of things. Into salads, they're great too. They're not going to be as predominantly garlic, as the bulb will itself. It's just going to have, kind of a mix between the green onion and garlic, which is really nice. All right, Tamara, what ingredients would you recommend to be used to make a whole food plant-based or a plant-based seafood boil? Um, let's see. That's a different one. So, a plant-based seafood boil. Um, I would probably look into hearts of palm, um, to have kind of that flaky, nice consistency that a fish might have. And then, for the boil, like if you're doing like it kind of depends on what kind of boil you're going to do. If you're thinking like a more traditional kind of New Orleans, like crawfish boil, I think you could chop up hearts of palm, do maybe even some bamboo in it, do the small corn, do potatoes. You would probably put the rest of the seasoning ingredients you would put in with a normal boil as well. So your seasonings could all stay the same. You just have to figure out what to be able to replace those. So doing your potatoes, your corn, doing uh, a a palm, like a hearts of palm would be a good one, and then maybe even jackfruit might be a nice consistency to be able to put into it as well too. That is probably where I'd start with it. I've never done a seafood boil like that, but that was probably where I'd start with some of those. Actually, scallops out of King Trumpet is the next question here. I think that's a great one too. So mushrooms are fantastic to be able to make scallops out of. So you may basically take the King Trumpet mushroom and you slice them into kind of thin coins, and then I usually do like a scoring on the top and bottom of them, and I'll marinate mine in like a lemon juice and a little bit of tamari, water, and a couple other things too, and then saute those off. So that would be great in that broil as well. So let's read Tony's question here because now I'm going into scallops. So I made scallops out of King Trumpet mushrooms and they were okay, but now I want to make scallops out of tofu. Can you share any tips for creating scallops from tofu besides pressing the tofu? I think that you're on the right track here, Tony. Pressing the tofu and getting a very dense tofu is probably the best way to be able to start. And I would use the marinating process like I just talked about, where I marinated the King Trumpet mushrooms and like a little bit of lemon, little like it's actually a good amount of lemon, tamari. I think I added a little paprika to it, salt, pepper, and a little bit of water, and use it as my marinade. But there are a couple kinds of tofu that are very dense. I think they're called high protein tofus, where like I mean they're very, very dense, and you could probably cut those into the size to be able to make that happen for the scallops as well too. Hope that helps. All right, Beth, does using extra or super firm tofu to avoid pressing compromise the flavor of the dishes? No, the flavor usually stays the same. Extra or super firm tofu are like just, so similar to each other. Like if you were doing silken tofu, your tofu would just kind of melt into the dish. But extra or super firm tofu are so close to each other. They're pretty much going to do the same thing in any dish flavor, and they'll absorb the flavor the same way at the same time. Denise, I do not have an air fryer, and I would like to have the roasted crispy chickpeas. Can you suggest something to get a fantastic crunch of air fryer crispy chickpeas without the air fryer? Absolutely. Use your oven. Some ovens, if you have a gas oven, they have a pilot light that's on the inside, and I've seen people literally just put their chickpeas right in their oven and leave them there for 24 hours, and they'll come out crispy, which I've never done before. I usually keep it on the lowest setting I possibly can on the oven, and watch it for a little bit less time, and then also shake them frequently. So I think the last time I did it, I think the lowest setting my oven at the time would go like 200, and I basically set it to 200, and then every 10 to 15 minutes would check them, shake them around a little bit to make sure they weren't sticking on the bottom, to be able to make that same thing. And they came out very wonderful, a nice crispy chickpea at the same time. So yeah, you don't need the air fryer to do everything. Air fryers are basically, a convection oven, right? So if you have a convection oven, you need a better way to be able to do that. Hope that helps, Denise, and happy cooking. All right. It looks like we reached the end of our questions for the day. I hope you guys learned something new today. Thanks so much for joining us at the Ask Me Anything office hours. Have a great week. Have a great week and happy cooking.